Hello, Sure Babe listeners. This is episode 39 of the Sure Babe podcast. This episode is for women. That does not mean that any men listening should turn it off. It actually means you should turn this up. If you want to understand women and women as mothers, listen to this episode. I am so excited to introduce you guys to Jessie Harrold. She is a coach, a doula, a mentor for women, and she writes all about true femininity and owning your power as a woman and a mother. I am so excited for you guys to hear this episode because I feel like it is empowering for any woman to listen to. And I think that it is a good topic to explain that true feminism really isn't about hating men or thinking women are better than men. It just means that we should all be for women. We should be for women owning their power and their femininity. So in this episode, Jessie and I talk all about that. We talk about our bodies and loving them as women and loving them for what they do and reframing how we've had past negative views of our body. We talk about transitioning from being a woman and then into being a woman that's a mother. It's just such a good episode, and I'm excited for you guys to listen. So without further ado, here is Jessie Harrold. Hello, Sure Babe listeners. Welcome back to the show. I am excited today to have an amazing woman on the podcast. Her name is Jessie Harrold, and she is a coach, mentor, doula, and author of the book Project Body Love. She is doing work that I am so passionate about, and that's why I'm excited to have her on the show today. So we're going to talk all about finding our identity after becoming a mom and how that shifts and changes. We're going to talk about the relationships we have with our bodies and just being a woman in this day and age and how to find out who we really are. So I'm excited. Welcome to the show, Jessie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited that you're here. I personally am doing some deep inner work on my soul and finding my true identity in a woman and what that means now after having 3 kids. So I was, selfishly wanting to have you on to talk about the work you do as not only a doula, but a coach and now an author. So why don't you just share with people today who you are and what you do and how you got into this work?
Yeah, sure. So I should probably start by saying that I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I spend the vast majority of my time cutting the crusts off of peanut butter sandwiches. And in the other part of my life, I'm a doula and a life coach. And I teach a couple of online programs and run retreats and wilderness quests for women. And I also just this year, as you mentioned in the intro, launched my first book, Project Body Love. So I got into this work 11 years ago. I did my doula training, and it probably wasn't what I thought I was going to do with my life. At the time, I was doing a master's degree in health promotion and spent most of my formative years wanting to become a doctor, and life just had other plans. And I got into doula work because I met someone at a party who was a doula and thought that I should be a doula too. It was kind of one of those decisions that I made in my early 20s,
Yeah.
And it just turned out to be my life's work, strangely enough, And over the years of doing this, I had my own babies along the way and did my own mother shift and have kind of expanded that work beyond just that transition to motherhood, because I think what makes me curious and passionate about working with women in the transition to motherhood, it was never that I really liked cuddling babies or anything. It was more so that I was really interested in women's power. And I saw that transition to motherhood as a time of great potential for women to connect with that power. And so in other areas of my work too, that's kind of the realm that I play in and work in is, the situations and circumstances of our lives that call us into our power, that create the sort of fertile ground for us to be more fully ourselves, to learn more about who we are, maybe remember who we are. And I think motherhood is one of those, intense and wonderful life situations that calls us to ourselves in that way. And I think there's other experiences that we have that do the same. And so that's kind of been the spectrum of my work over the last, 11 years or so.
Wow, what a calling. And I just love that you were on this certain trajectory and then it shifted and you end up becoming a doula, not a doctor, but also like you're still helping women in a whole like completely different way, but so powerful. I just think that's so great. I mean, I can personally identify with that too. Like I started out in advertising sales and then was like, no, I need to completely shift, and then became a therapist and then fell into this online world of blogging and sharing my life. And I'm like, well, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still helping women. So I just love hearing how people find their paths and kind of just go with that. And not have to have everything, meet up to what they thought was going to happen. So
yeah, it's deeply reassuring to know that there's like this plumb line of truth in all of the sort of wayward paths that we take, it's sort of, okay, this was it all along.
Oh yeah. And I in my mind, I'm like, I would love to be a doula someday. I don't know if I could handle the pressure, but I'm like that is such a sacred position. I had a doula for the first time with my last birth, and every time I look at her, whenever I see her, I want to cry because I was like, you were with me in one of the hardest and most transformational moments of my life, and I just like I just get so emotional when I think about her and she does it for a living, so maybe she doesn't feel the same way, but I was just like, this is such a sacred job. So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the shifts that you've seen, because obviously you walked women through this transition more, probably than the average person. And so what is this like shift that you see women making after they become mothers? I know in my own personal life, it was different after each child. Number one was always the biggest transition, because it was going from, not knowing that relationship of having a child to then, oh my gosh, I have this baby I have to take care of and I'm responsible for their life. And it was honestly, it was very anxiety provoking for me. It still is. I have a whole different relationship around anxiety and my children now. But in the beginning, it was like I couldn't even enjoy my newborn because I was so anxious that I was in charge of keeping him alive and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that you kind of highlight that it changes with every child too, because I think those of us who've had more than one child, maybe we think that the transition to motherhood is over after we just become mother and there's a new title. But I think it's true that we change with the birth of every child, because our children are different, our birth experiences are different, and there's a different. I don't know if you felt this way, but for me at least, like bringing a second human into the world changed kind of the dynamic. It changed like how we were as a household. It took many more hands and much more time and all of these things to kind of keep all the plates spinning, right? To just be very pragmatic about it. And it changed the dynamics in our household yet again. And certainly like the way that I was able to kind of care for myself or pursue the things that were sort of outside of my motherhood changed as well. I think that's a pretty common experience for women as they add more children to their family.
Yeah, it really is, and you have to give yourself that grace and acknowledge that you're not going to operate the same way that you did after your first child than, after your second or even your third, because things do get crazier, but also just more love. There's just so much more love and crazy. That's what I think. But I love how in the beginning you said, I help women find their power in motherhood and in themselves, and that you actually picked motherhood as a time where women can become more powerful, which I think now is so counterculture. It's now becoming more of a, awareness that, wow, we women are so powerful and strong. But I feel like in the past that would have been like, well, no, you're a mom, you need to be selfless now. Oh, career? No, you don't have a career anymore. You're a mom. And like, I grew up with that kind of mentality, like, oh, I have to pick a career that I can do as a mother, or I have to, honestly, it sounds terrible to say, but like I have to pick a husband that can, support me so that I can be a stay-at-home mom. And now I feel like our world is different, and our minds are open more to the fact that women are powerful, and you do not have to deny that part of yourself that still wants to work, or still wants a passion, or still wants something outside of motherhood. What are your thoughts on that?
I have so many thoughts on that. I feel like I could go in a couple of different directions. I would say, first of all, just briefly, and we can dive in further if you want to on this, but I feel like there is great potential for women to step into power in motherhood. And also, I think a great number of women don't, or aren't supported in that way, for so many reasons. I think, first of all, that motherhood generally is kind of both deified and devalued. And so, maybe we're not supported to the fullest extent to have an empowering birth experience, whatever that looks like for each individual woman, and an empowering postpartum experience. I think that we live in a culture now that makes parenting, I think, and mothering more difficult maybe than it's ever been before. And so I think it's this experience of birthing and nourishing and raising a tiny human, it has that potential, and we don't always get to kind of grasp that potential. And I think, part of it, so that kind of segues into what you were talking about around kind of roles, I guess. And I come from maybe a different perspective, certainly a different, maybe feminist perspective when it comes to motherhood. And, which is that, I think that maybe through like the 80s and early 90s, kind of feminists were all about, having your cake and eating it too. And like, I can be a mother, and I can be a worker bee, whatever that career path looks like. And I can be. And I think there's something quite powerful in saying, actually, that's a little unfair too. And that, expecting ourselves to do it all or have it all is also really kind of damaging. And I see that so often, even very pragmatically in the early postpartum period, where I see women really suffering in that kind of what I call the big slowdown especially in the early postpartum. But like, let's face it, I think we all kind of, no matter how old your children are, it kind of feels like this. But that, those of us who kind of have identified ourselves as people who can get stuff done and who are productive, quote unquote, productive members of society, and who are kind of achievement oriented, find ourselves, I think that's like a huge identity shift. It's not just that you're no longer as kind of maybe accomplished, let's say, or ticking off as many things on your to-do list as you were before. But I think that really undermines an identity that a lot of us have of ourselves as being, that our value is predicated on our ability to be productive. And I think there's this kind of element of really the patriarchy that we're living in, that kind of it devalues motherhood in the sense that it devalues that quality of a very kind of a non-linear existence where we're kind of, especially in those early days of postpartum, like maybe lost in between nights and days and breastfeeding, and we're not getting anything done on our to-do lists. And I think So when I talk about the role of motherhood, I'm very interested in that balance between motherhood and all of the other things that we are, but then having that balance in a way that's compassionate to what's possible for us as women and what energizes us as women. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes complete sense to me, because I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. If you know the Enneagram, I'm definitely like this achiever performer kind of person.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm like, I thrive off of productivity and getting things done. And when I'm in my highest self, I am doing that in order to help other people. And oftentimes I feel like my ego does get in the way, because if I feel bad or I feel like I'm not doing enough, I am like, why am I putting that pressure on myself? I'm raising 3 humans right now, and why is that sometimes not enough for me? And I think that it's okay to go into that and think, well, because I am more than just their mom. I am a woman with a passion and a desire to help other women and, help provide even in our family. But there are times where I'm like, I just want to be okay with being, but like not checking off to-do list boxes. And what I've been learning, in some of this like work that I've been doing, is that we do live in like a 3 country. We live in a country that's very masculine, that it says we need to be achieving and doing. And that's very much a masculine trait. And so I'm relearning what femininity is and like what that is inside of me. And I'm realizing that that's like more of a flow, and that's more of like a go with, being able to be fluid and being able to be in the moment. And so instead of just like doing and achieving and accomplishing more. So I think that's what I took out of what you just said, is that we as women, especially in motherhood, get to relearn that balance, maybe even, more than anybody else, because if you are like the primary caregiver, you constantly have to, my children are my greatest teacher. They do constantly tell me when I need to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
I feel like...
I think that... Oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, that's kind of how my identity has shifted. Exactly how we were saying in the beginning. It shifts after each pregnancy, and I'm like, or each birth, and I'm thinking... Yeah, that's how mine has shifted after this 3rd birth. I went from like, oh no, I can't do anything anymore. My life is solely about taking care of this child, to I have a business I'm trying to run. I'm trying to raise 3 humans and be present for them at the same time, and then figure out who the heck I am.
Yeah. And that's a lot, isn't it?
Oh gosh, it's a lot. It's a lot. And that's why I think it was so great you said we live in a day and age where it's probably the hardest to be a parent right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I'm kind of right with you in terms of, I feel like this is sort of my greatest lesson in mothering. I feel like motherhood kind of takes us and like pushes us right into that sort of, archetypically feminine way of existing. It boots us right into our bodies, right from day one, from the minute we conceive. Like, we have to be embodied. We have no choice. It boots us into that kind of, spiral thinking as opposed to linear. It boots us into being more comfortable with the unknown, into intuition. And that sense of inner knowing in a way. So it's almost like it's kind of a crash course in some of those very feminine qualities. Whether we like it or not, I think sometimes that's sort of the things that we learn in motherhood, and that's I call those elements the mother powers, because I feel like those are things that can make us deeply uncomfortable, because they make it harder to survive in a patriarchal world. And also, I think that that's where our great potential lies as mothers, is that we kind of have access, automatic access to a whole other realm of ways of knowing and ways of being in the world that we, other times, in situations other than motherhood, we might have to work a little harder at. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that embodiment in terms of once you become a mother. And I know I get asked a lot about, like, when did you lose the baby weight, or when did, and I think that we do have this pressure that we put on ourselves to go back to how we look, go back to how we were. And what are your thoughts on embodying this new person that you are? Because even after during my third postpartum, I was still hard on myself, and I still am. And I'm like, why can I just not be accepting of this person and this vessel that has done created 3 beautiful humans? And let's talk about that. How can we encourage people today, encourage women today, especially, about their changing bodies in motherhood and embodying who they truly are?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think I have kind of like 2 things I want to say about this. The first is that, so I, just completed and I'm touring my book, Project Body Love, and the subtitle of Project Body Love is My Quest to Love My Body and the Surprising Truth I Found Instead. And I think that the idea of body love has become just as kind of deified and put on a pedestal as like thinness or whatever kind of our version of perfection is today. And that actually living in a world that doesn't love all bodies, living in a world where, it's impossible not to see like the tabloid magazines, making fun of people's cellulite or something when you're at the grocery store. Like, it's impossible not to be impacted in some way by messages that tell us that our bodies are not good enough. And so part of the message of my book is really to give women lots of permission to feel like it's hard to love your body sometimes, and that maybe what's more interesting than body love is being in relationship with your body, being embodied, or maybe acceptance, maybe respect, and just, I guess, to like offer women who are listening to this like a little bit of compassion to say that body love doesn't have to be like yet another thing on your to-do list that you're failing at. It's not an easy thing to have. There's an eagle flying out my window right now, and I just wanted to say that because I'm like feeling distracted.
How beautiful.
Like literally right outside my window. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about this is like specifically around our mother bodies and that shift into motherhood. It's interesting that, one of the big kind of dialogues that we have around motherhood is the idea of getting back to your old self. Mm-hmm. And whether that means like your old jeans or like drinking coffee hot or going out for like coffee dates or date nights with your partner or whatever that looks like, we often talk about going back to the way things were. And like, I think as mothers, we actually, and like myself included, spend a lot of energy, time, money, and resources on trying to get things back to the way they were. And, when I look at motherhood as a rite of passage, as, there is no going back, actually. And this idea of like losing yourself in motherhood is another thing that I think we've really kind of demonized in our culture. And I think that has to do with the devaluation of motherhood. Like, oh no, don't lose yourself to motherhood. Motherhood is a terrible thing to have lost yourself to. And I think the whole basis of our conversation so far has been actually, what if motherhood allowed you to step into your greatest power? And I could be a little bit feminist here and say that there's a lot of, institutions and kind of, narratives in our culture that routinely undermine that ability for us to step into our power as women, because I think that it's so incredibly amazing when a woman who becomes a mother feels more powerful in the process. And so I think
what do you think some of those just to pause you, what do you think some of those things are, just like for women that might be noticing that too, like what's an example of something that might come up and make you feel that way, like I'm not supposed to be powerful in motherhood?
That you're not feeling powerful.
Yeah, would you just say it's overall messaging of our culture, or it's like, oh no, you're putting your child in daycare? Like, what are some of those things that you've seen with maybe some clients that have set them back in that way?
Yeah, I kind of have a list of things that, again, it kind of touches on the idea of it's maybe never been harder than it is right now to become a mother. I think it starts, and this is the kind of doula in me speaking, it starts with our birth practices. I think that, in the last 100 years, birth has changed dramatically and has become medicalized quite dramatically also. And so I want to be clear that I'm not speaking about women's individual birth experiences, but generally a culture of birth that has changed, and, many competencies around birth that have been lost by the people who are supporting us in our birthing process. And we're just now kind of uncovering some of the evidence that shows, for example, like the hormonal impacts of some of the interventions that so many women are receiving in birth. And those hormonal impacts have an immediate effect on our postpartum mental wellness. So that's one thing. I think technology in general, the fact that we can, yes, we've got this beautiful ability to be well supported by social media and our kind of interconnectivity. It also is a double-edged sword. And so there's this aspect of, comparing ourselves to other mothers, or feeling like we've got to like be or do or say or think all of these really different things in order to be okay, or the quote unquote good mother. I think that impacts us deeply. I think we've lost the village, that used to support us when mothering got hard. I think that's a huge change in our society. I think that idea of getting back to normal, or that idea of the hustle, like staying busy and not actually sinking into what motherhood often calls us into is like a big slowdown. You're not going to get anything done. Your body is changing. Everything is just a little slower and a little softer. And we often, myself included, fight against that tooth and nail. And all of these things are sort of, it really, in so many ways, fight this very natural process of becoming a mother. And when we're denying that process at all costs, then I think it's inherently disempowering.
I'm just flashing back to like a few things that I would love to like be vulnerable and share with you and get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure.
Well, one was just, yesterday I got so much done, and I was just thriving off of I didn't get my workout in, but I still was like, high on the productivity and getting things done. And now I'm thinking there are days like that like it feels good, but then there are also days where I have to be okay with the messes on the floor, and my baby just needs me to soothe her all the time, and my 7-year-old really needs me to just be there and watch this, Lego video with him, or it's just those moments are just as precious, if not more, than completing the project that I'm trying to complete. And I know that, but it's just so hard these days when it's like, the message is that you need to do it all. And I have a few friends that once a year I like to have this women's dinner, and I called it the No BS dinner. And it was like, basically you have to come and you have to be willing to share and open up about something that you're struggling with in your life. And it was a beautiful dinner. I've done it like 3 times. I need to do one again. And we all just sit around a table and we all just like immediately got so real. And then we were all there with each other in that to express like, you know, either give feedback or just basically support. And to me, that was like the epitome of the village.
Yeah.
And I encourage every, you know, woman to host their own no BS party because it was so refreshing to
I love that.
Yeah, to let down our guard and to be like, you know what? My husband and I fight all the time and I don't know what to do about it. Or I am struggling, you know, a couple of the women would often express a feeling of inadequacy in motherhood of like, I'm just a mom and I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I haven't found my other thing. And to me, that made me really sad and almost feel guilty because I do have another thing. I have found a passion online of blogging and writing and helping other women. So it felt awkward for me because it was like, oh, am I adding to that pressure that they feel of just being a stay-at-home mom? And I've since kind of reframed that as like, moms, never say you're just a mom because that in turn devalues you so much. You are a therapist, you are a nurse, a doctor, a chauffeur, a professional organizer, a chef, you know, you name it. Like, you are so much right now. So I just would love some of your thoughts on that feeling of maybe that awkwardness that I was feeling as this woman that still needs to have a passion and an outside outlet. That's very much who I am. And my therapist says that I would not be a good enough, or I would not be as good of a mom without my work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, as you're describing, all the roles that we play as mothers, it comes back down to this kind of devaluation because as you were saying, I was like, yeah, we don't get paid for any of them. And being paid, making money is sort of the value, the currency of our value in the world in this culture, right? And it's fascinating to me. And I mean, I live this myself as well, so I'm certainly not. I'm speaking from a deep sense of resonance with this. That like we do so much. We're constantly aware. We know how many toilet paper rolls are left, and we know whose birthday is coming up and when the library books are due. And it's this emotional labor that it seems to fall to us as women and mothers. Whether we work outside the home or not, and yet we have this propensity to say, I'm just, raising the next generation of humans. Right. And it's also, I think, for me, and I can only speak for me, I do this dance too, Chrissy, like this sort of, yes, I have these like amazing passions outside of motherhood. And I also have a propensity towards, wanting to kind of achieve things. And I have a lot of ambition. And I think for me, I need to be discerning as to when those things are serving me and making me a better mom and serving my family and serving my children and on all of those things, and when they're not. And I feel like it's a slippery slope every single day. So, I wake up at very early in the morning, like ridiculously early in the morning to write. And I do that because that's when no one else is awake, which is, my reality right now. And I need that. And it is so incredibly nourishing, and nobody in my house messes with that time. Like it's,
How early do you
mine.
I'm mine alone. I must know. How early?
4 o'clock.
So you wake up at 4, and how many hours do you write for?
So I'll usually get 2.5 hours of time, maybe 2, depending on, how awake the children are in the morning or when they get up. But it's really sacred. And then so that time feels really nourishing to me. That is a time when I'm not mothering. I am totally in this other role as like writer, And just kind of doing the things that feel, really nourishing to me. 2:00 in the afternoon when I'm trying to send off an email and I'm like, no, just a minute. Okay, I'll build your Lego later. And like, oh, there's a leftover tuna sandwich that I forgot to cut the crust off of or whatever. And like that serves no one,
You're
and
right.
my ambition in that setting, my need to get something done, my need to identify myself as somebody who can send off an email at 2:00 in the afternoon or be a quote unquote good entrepreneur by being responsive to my email inbox or my followers or something. Generally that stuff doesn't, like that particular situation doesn't serve me or anybody. So that's not to say I don't totally do that every day. Like, I gotta get this done, but I think, I think it's like a slippery slope. It's like a fine line. And I think we all get to kind of discern what feels best for us. And I also think, that, at least my experience has been, I shared with you right before we got on this call that my kids will both be in school for the first time this next week, and for me it's marking like another rite of passage, which is kind of the closing of this incredibly intense season of motherhood. 2 years ago, I chose to quit my full-time out of the home job and be at home with the kids while running my business from home. And that has been a wicked crazy couple of years of living that impossible balance every single day. And, succeeding sometimes and failing most of the other time. And so like all that to say that, this is a season of our lives. And I think when I work with women, especially in the early postpartum, when it feels like you're completely consumed by motherhood, I think that it often serves us better. It certainly did for me to just surrender to it and like let go of all of the things that are not happening right now. And flow with what motherhood requires of you, because this season ends. Like you will have a career so many more years than you'll be intensely mothering. You'll have a marriage maybe for so many more years than you're intensely mothering. I mean, not intensely mothering by like especially those first couple of years. And so I think there's that. I often talk about surrender as like, those of us who have toddlers have totally had that experience of your toddler like having this huge meltdown over something that just can't be, like the sky is not green or like whatever. And you see, like, to me, this is a very visual image. Like you see how much energy they expend on something that is just not going to change. And I feel like that's sometimes what a lot of us do, especially in these like really intense early years of mothering, is that we spend a tremendous amount of our energy, resources, and power trying to change mothering into something that's just not. It's just super intense for the first few years. And like anytime, at least for me personally, that I've been able to just go, okay, like I'm just going to be the mom right now. This situation clearly just needs me as a mom, and I need to like drop the laundry or drop the whatever else I thought I was going to get done. Those situations often serve me better also. So when I think about like power and women's power and motherhood, it's this great paradox of our culture. I think that, in fact, there's great power in surrendering to what motherhood has in store for us, as opposed to fighting it.
I love that imagery. And I just want to be sensitive to the postpartum mom, because it literally flew by like in the blink of an eye, especially after my third baby. I can't believe she's 13 months already. But I'm just like, I always do go back and say, gosh, I wish that I could have surrendered a little bit more. I think after each child I got better.
Yeah.
But I also got more ambitious. It was crazy. It was this weird balance and push and pull of the two. But I hear you saying that that's okay, because that's the embodiment of who we are personally or individually. I am realizing, okay, this is part of me. Some days it gets attention, and then some days I have to surrender, and that's just as powerful.
So true. I think I feel the same way. Like, my first baby was like the big world rocker in that sense, and my second, I was like a little better at just letting things go, because intellectually I knew that this too shall pass the first time around, but the second and multiple times around, you actually know that this too shall pass. Like, there will be a day when you're not completely consumed by this. But I love what you said about your ambition growing, because I think one of the mother powers is creativity. I see women like having this incredible, it gives me chills to think about, incredible surge of creativity in motherhood, which, like, when we think of it metaphorically, like, you just created a human and you're in creative mode. I mean, that's what happened with me in my business. And I think that motherhood catalyzes a lot of things for us, like not just creativity, but, I think we have the opportunity to become much more clear on what's important to us and what we value and what matters. And I think that can release a tremendous amount of energy in the direction of the life you want to be living. And so, I see women, picking up their paintbrushes for the first time in decades when they become mothers, or starting businesses. And that's kind of like, to segue to some of the other work I do. That was like, when I started working with women in, going through massive transition in other areas of their life, it was because I was noticing that motherhood was not just kind of catalyzing these very pragmatic changes to the way your days looked, maybe, or how you spent your time, but actually to enormous amounts of the rest of your life. And I think, it's such a cool power that we can harness as mothers. And we may roll our eyes and joke that, like, when do I have time to pick up my paintbrushes? But I actually feel like we somehow do. I don't know about you, but yeah.
No, I often joke that I had less time in motherhood, but I had way more ambition after I became a mom. And it was funny because it's like, you would think, wow, now you don't have any time, but you find, I think women, especially moms, get so creative about their time and their efforts and what they're going to do with their time. And it's insane how productive we can be with, like, uninterrupted time, but also with our kids. Like, if you are an artist and you feel like now you don't have time to paint, and this was actually a real life example I gave a client who felt like their artist had died after they had 2 kids, and that was her wording. And we sat there with that and felt it, and it was incredibly sad, but also the surrender. I can see it almost now that was where it was at, like surrendering to that feeling that part of you has not been paid attention to and is still there. And so we kind of strategized and came up with some ways that maybe she could bring that back into her life with her children, finger painting, or, eventually finding time when you could step away to do that, because it was so important to her to have that part of her come back to life. And it was like, we reframed it to like, no, your artist has not died. She just has been quiet because this mother, now has been in full force. And at the time she had little support. Husband worked a lot. And so, it was this rough time. So I was actually thinking of her when you were talking about that, and was wondering if there's someone listening right now that feels like that too, that says, I have no time for myself and I feel like I'm drowning. And I want so badly to get to where, maybe you and I are, where we're balancing the two. What would you say to someone like that comes into your office and is just kind of lost and feeling like that?
Yeah. I kind of want to loop it back around to this idea of motherhood as a rite of passage. And the reason why I love speaking about motherhood in this frame of mind is that necessary to a rite of passage is a period of loss and release and grief. And it's something that we don't talk about almost at all, really, when it comes to motherhood, especially when motherhood is like a happy occasion, something that's expected and wanted, and we're supposed to be really happy about it. And yet, yes, great swaths of us, of ourselves, become lost in the process. And I think that it is so important to just talk about that and normalize it a little bit. And some parts of ourselves, like there are some beautiful losses that happen in motherhood. I know a great many women who just don't have time for bull anymore. Don't have time for like inauthenticity or people who are fake, or you know what I mean? That can be, and sometimes, there's losses of, for example, friendships or relationships that were probably due to be, released anyways. So there are beautiful losses in motherhood, and there's also other losses that are challenging. Sometimes the losses of those relationships can be really painful, and the loss of the sort of who we think ourselves to be, and whether that's sort of on an identity level or if it's on a just in terms of like the things that we like to do with our time, like painting or whatever. And I think that, some of those things will come back. Maybe not all of them will. And they'll come back when it's time, and it's never on your timeline. And I feel like maybe sometimes those are like hard words to hear, but I feel like to me, it gives women deep permission to, if they're looking for an opportunity to stop fighting it and to actually talk about the things that they're sad about when it comes to their motherhood. I think that's so important. I've never met a woman who didn't kind of have a deep sigh of relief when she realized that this is something that so many of us go through. And that it's allowed to be painful. To, have lost your inner artist, or, I haven't surfed since my kids were born, maybe one day, but like, and those are little things maybe, but I think that it's important to like have that conversation. I also think the other part of this kind of idea of rites of passage is liminal space. So it's a space of, not with that.
I love liminal space. So keep talking about that.
Once we kind of release and grieve, we're sort of left with this like almost a blank slate. Like we're not that anymore. We're not maybe the woman we were before we became a mother, but we're not this yet. We're not yet fully embodied in motherhood. And I'm very fond of telling women that it takes 2 to 3 years to transition into motherhood. This takes time. And I think that liminal space, I just want to encourage women that if they're feeling lost, or if they're kind of not sure who they are now that they're mothers, we tend to be very uncomfortable with that. And then we try to fill in all of the gaps. So we like, aim for productivity, for example. I'm sure you and I are both done this. Yeah. If I can only get these things done, then I can feel a sense of self again. Or, just kind of, and I think the tendency, because liminal space is so uncomfortable, is to bypass it. And I guess, again, I want to like offer up that it's possible that you can be in this liminal space, and that you can find a sense of safety here. And it's a beautiful space to learn to listen to yourself, and to learn some really deeply nourishing self-tending practices to help you kind of stay here in liminality. Because I think when we can stay here and hold in this really uncomfortable experience of not knowing who you are now, we have more of an ability to allow that sort of authentic, powerful woman that we're meant to become come to us and be revealed to us, rather than kind of jumping back into old patterns that felt comfortable before motherhood. So I think it's a place of great discomfort and a place of great potential. And I also think that it's a place to get support, because it is so uncomfortable. I think it can kind of trip us into some really challenging feelings, and possibly even, postpartum depression and anxiety, which I think, I think it's supportive to normalize the experience of loss and liminality in motherhood. And I also think we need support with it, so that we can move through it to the other side, which is exploring who you are now as a mother.
Wow. I love that so much. If anybody was wondering what liminal space is, in my mind, I feel like it's when you're transitioning from season to season and you don't know this new season that you're in, and you're like questioning and you feel kind of lost, and for me it feels gross, and maybe until I accept it for what it is, and I say, okay, it's okay to be lost, it's okay to feel this way, I am learning and growing, and when I reach the next more comfortable phase, I will have loved this and learned a lot from it. So to me, in a nutshell, that's liminal space.
Yeah, it's the space between. I often liken it to when you think about plants. So this kind of period of release and grief is often like composting. Like you're kind of, taking the muck and digging it into the earth and creating fertile ground. And this liminal space is like that time in spring when you've planted the seeds, but they haven't come up yet. And you're looking every day waiting for the sign that spring will come, and it hasn't yet. And so I think it's deeply uncomfortable, but there's a sense of reassurance that like this is the fertile ground for who you are and who you're meant to become.
It's definitely fertile ground. What a beautiful way to wrap this up on being okay with being in that weird liminal space. Oh gosh, we could continue and talk forever about the beauty of motherhood and these transitions. So we will definitely have to have you back on. But I wanted to close by just asking you a few quick questions, kind of rapid fire. Like, what inspires you right now?
Being outside, being in nature inspires me. I go on a walk every morning, and that's where all my creativity flows from, just being outdoors.
I love that. Yeah. There's something that happens, I feel like, when you're, like walking outside, that allows your mind to just open up more, and then you get more creative ideas. So I'm the same way.
Yeah.
What is the last thing that made you smile?
This morning, my daughter drew tattoos over my son's entire body with washable marker. So he literally has he's a rainbow on his face and like trees down his legs and a butterfly on his back. And it was awesome. And plus I kept them occupied for almost an entire half hour. So I got to have hot coffee. So all of these things are good.
Awesome. This one might not be so rapid fire, but what was the hardest part about writing a book?
Well, I think if I'm going to be super honest, having my mom read it. Because the writing process, writers out there are going to hate me, but it just came out of me. It flowed out of me, but it was that process of bringing it out into the world that I think was more challenging.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the best part of writing a book?
Right now, and hearing the stories of women who've said, oh my goodness, your book changed my life. I never expected this to change anyone's life aside from my own. And I get emails every single day from women who have, highlighted the entire book and sticky tabbed it. And, it's just like, wow, pretty amazing, humbling.
That's so awesome. Where can everybody find you, and where can they find your book?
So my website is www.jessieharrold.com, and they can buy my book there, or they can buy my book on pretty much anywhere, like Amazon and all of those places. It's everywhere. And I also hang out a lot on Instagram at jessie.es.harrold. And I write a lot. And so if people kind of like receiving newsletters or like updates and that kind of thing, you can follow me my newsletter from my website, or just follow me on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessie, for being here. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that episode encouraged you as much as it encouraged me. If you want to find out more about Jessie and her book and the courses and programs she offers for women, you can find her at jessieharrold.com. That's JessieHarrold.com. And as always, if you are liking this podcast, please rate and review it wherever you're listening. And let us know what resonates with you. Send us a DM on Instagram. I'm at Chrissy J. Powers, #SureBabePodcast. We would love to hear from you. And we just appreciate your time so much. So thank you so much for being here and have an absolutely wonderful week.